Hello, welcome to Marathon Swim Stories, where we connect with curious and courageous individuals from all walks of life to explore our relationship with water, what holds people back, and why others keep going, where we investigate the connection that we have with each other, those who support us, and the water that is 70% of our planet. If you've ever stood at the edge of a body of water and wondered, you're in good company. I'm Shannon Keegan, mom, wife, marathon swimmer, swim efficiency coach, and founder of Intrepid Water, where I teach swim freedom, virtually, locally, and abroad. The freedom to get started, break out of your comfort zone, or shatter your preconceived notions of what's possible. Find out more at intrepidwater.com. Hello, Marathon Swim Story listeners. Are you someone that swims every single day? Can you imagine swimming every single day for a decade? Peter recently informed me that if he keeps going with his daily swims, on February 12th of 2025, he will hit his 4,000th consecutive swim. And if he continues through his 50th birthday in June, he will have swam every single day of his 40s. How does he do it? As a freshwater ecologist, he has the distinct advantage of ready access to all kinds of water for his work. But even so, Peter has a formidable resolve. His passion for swimming is palpable. Named by Stephen Monatones as the first Ultra Iceman, an ice-swimming ultramarathon runner who's completed both an ice mile and a marathon run of at least 100 kilometers, Peter has so many amazing stories that we didn't even have a chance to dig into how he pulls off his daily swims as a husband and father. Shoot me an email with your questions, shannon@intrepidwater.com. Maybe we can have Peter back. I hope that you enjoy Peter Hancock's story. All right, so I'm here today with Peter Hancock. Peter, tell me, what's your story?
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for the chance. I've always been a swimmer. My first memories of swimming were in Western New South Wales in a river called the Bogan River, which is a big brown river. And I used to go in with my brother when we were 4 or 5, and we'd go down and we'd find yabbies, so little freshwater crayfish, and also big mussels that were sort of as big as your head, and we thought they were pretty cool. And so that got me into swimming, and it sort of started my interest in biology and my interest in the things that live in these rivers and inland waters. And then we moved around a fair bit as kids because my dad got relocated for his work, and one of our other places we lived was up in Weipa on Cape York, which was a pretty interesting place if you're keen on nature, because we had things like crocodiles and sharks and box jellyfish, but it really restricted where you could swim. And again, that sort of pushed us away from the coast into the freshwater, into the creeks. The crocodiles used to get into the creeks, but you sort of had to be careful of those too. But my brother and I were out in nature whenever we could. We'd sort of go out exploring. We'd say, see your mum and dad, and we'd just go off for the day in the bush on our bikes. And then fast forward a few years and wanted to go to university. I realised you could get a job and work with rivers and lakes at the same time. Signed up to do freshwater ecology, and I did that down in Armidale, which is in northern New South Wales. And I had my honours project was on a creek called the Never Never River, which is a subtropical stream. And it's really clear water, fast flowing, and it just has a lot of interesting little fish in it. Sort of freshwater stonefish is an example. They're dangerous if you step on them. And then I followed that through with a PhD in groundwater ecology, which is looking at the animals that live beneath the surface, so underneath in groundwater aquifers. And that got me a few opportunities to swim in caves and other places that not many people get to. And I did a postdoctoral research on groundwater ecology that took me into Queensland and New South Wales and Western Australia. And then Since I've finished that, I've been an environmental consultant, which is pretty much taking me all around the country, all around Australia for work, and I've been doing research and monitoring programs for fish, surface water invertebrates and groundwater invertebrates for the last 25 or nearly 30 years.
I trying to get my head around the kid that with the box belly jellyfish and the sharks and the crocodiles, and how that just, I guess it's just a way of life. So you just get used to it. Is that, how does that go?
You become, I suppose, aware of where the crocodiles might be or where the sharks are, and where, box jellyfish are everywhere. I actually got stung by a box jellyfish on my hand when I was a kid, and I had the scar there for years, and there's still a very faint remnant of it. It hurt a lot, but I survived. And we've had, the sharks, I've had more shark encounters on the east coast of Australia than I had up there, probably because we didn't get in the ocean up on Cape York. We were mainly stuck to the freshwater. There was a lake that we used to swim in called Lake Patricia, and it was an old mine pit, and it filled up with water in the wet season with fresh water. But every year before they sort of opened it for swimming, they had to go in and clear it of crocodiles, because in the wet season, the crocodiles move around and they'd get into the freshwater lake. So you always sort of had in the back of the mind thinking, oh, I hope they got all the crocodiles out.
So, but you obviously didn't have any fears of open water. You were just out there with the creatures.
Yeah, that's right. Up until a few years ago, there was always, when you're swimming in really deep water, in a deep lake, for example, and you can't see anything, there's always the thing in the back of your mind, what's beneath me? But then the logical ecologist sort of knows what's in this lake, and you know there's nothing really that's going to attack you.
Despite whatever popular media tells us we should be afraid of everything. But there wasn't any like pool swimming or swim team or anything like that?
Yeah, I did pool swimming, not squad. We used to go down with our friends, and at school we swam in pools. Over here in the 80s, there used to be a program where all school kids had to go and learn to swim, and had swim classes as part of their school sport, and we had swim carnivals. I remember when I was 4 or 5, our house was in Ningen, was not far away from the pool, so we used to walk down with our friends and go swimming as young kids. So yeah, swim pools have always been part of it, but most of my swimming has been in rivers or lakes. And the beaches also, and being in Australia, the beach is a big part of everybody's life. And we used to go for Christmas holidays or school holidays. We had cousins who lived on the Sunshine Coast, so we'd go and visit them every year and go swimming there.
So where does this long history of swimming take you now that you're aquatic ecologist? Tell us.
Well, about, 20 years ago, I signed up for my first ocean swim, which is a 2-kilometre swim, which seemed a long way back then, but I trained for that a lot in pools and lakes, and I got up to, I think I was swimming 3Ks by the time I got up to do the event, so I knew I could do it. And I just really enjoyed this ocean swim. Was at Coffs Harbour, which is on the north coast of New South Wales, and you swim out around the end of a jetty and do a loop in a harbour and then back to shore. And I remember being nervous at the start line because there was hundreds of other people with me, and you get in the water at an open water swim, and there's people pushing you who want to get to the front, and then you get in the water and it's pretty mad swimming, and they knock your goggles off and put your goggles back on, and you just keep going. And that excited me a bit, all that hustle and bustle, and it gives you an adrenaline rush, and you sort of swim faster than you normally would. And I ended up getting, I think, second or third for my age group. So it sort of set the hook, and it inspired me to keep doing these ocean swims. And there used to be a good series that had about 5 or 6 different ocean swims in different locations on the north coast of New South Wales. But about 5 or 6 years ago, there were a few shark attacks, not as part of the ocean swims, but in the locations where the ocean swims were. And they shut a few of the events down because obviously registrations were down. And that's a bit disappointing, really. But they haven't had many shark attacks since then. But it sort of gives swimming a bad name when that happens. So they closed a few of the events down. There's still a few. The Coffs Harbour one is still going. So I do that every year. And then there's one at Byron Bay that's still going as well. But the ocean swimming scene in Sydney is quite big. There's a lot of events down there. But they also had one in Copeden Dam, which is an inland reservoir. It's about 400 kilometres inland. And they had a 5 kilometre swim in that. So I did that a few years, and that sort of started building my distance up. And then I started doing ultramarathon runs, and that sort of got me interested in endurance and longer distances. And I started to think, I wonder what a 10K swim would be like. So just got in one day and did a 10K swim. There's a dam, a small dam near Armidale that used to be our water supply more than 100 years ago, but they've closed that as a water supply, and it's now a recreation dam where you go swimming or fishing. And it's about a 1 kilometre loop. So I got in and did 10 laps of that.
Just decided one day going to go do 10K?
Yeah. Well, I built up to 5Ks, and I thought, 10Ks, twice as long. And it turned out to be take a bit longer than I thought, but I got out with sore shoulders, and I did have some food. I had some gels that I had from running, and I put them in the back of my Speedos and stop and have one every now and then. And the water is clean enough to drink, so I just every now and then swim along and have a sip and stop the gel, keep going. But it was good fun, and just being out there is nice because you see all the birds and occasional fish and turtles in the water. So just enough to keep you interested. And then a few years ago, I had a friend from Western New South Wales, Brendan Cullen. He was planning to swim the English Channel, and I thought, that's 32 kilometres or 33 kilometres in a straight line. I know you've got to account for currents and things, but I thought, I might build up and have a go at that. So I did a few 20-kilometre sessions in a swimming pool.
That takes a lot to do 20K in a pool mentally.
Yeah, in winter gets down to 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. So I swam it in the pool just to get the distance, but I kept also swimming in the dam because cold water is another thing I'm quite keen on. But I think it was in November when it warmed up, I went out and did to the Copeden Dam, which I mentioned earlier, and I had a friend on a paddleboard, and I set off. I had some more gels in my Speedos, and I had a tow float behind me with a few more gels, and I swam 5 or 10 kilometres, and then my mate met me with the paddleboard, refilled my gels or gave me more gels and refilled I had a soft flask of electrolyte in my Speedos as well. And then he left, and then I just kept swimming, and it was a nice swim. I was by myself most of the time, and occasionally there were fishermen in boats in the middle of the dam, and they'd come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" And I just said, "I'm just going for a swim." And that was good fun. There was a thunderstorm when I'd done about 20-something Ks. There was a thunderstorm. I could just see it coming. I could see the lightning. And so I got out of the water, and Graham, my friend, he met me, and we just sort of sat that out for a little while, waited for the storm to pass. And then I got back in the water and finished off the 30. I didn't get the 32 or 33 that I'd hoped because we ran the gates to the dam, the reservoir, close at, I think it was 9 o'clock at night. So I got out and we had to make a bolt for the gates, and so we didn't get locked in. But yeah, it was more just for the adventure of it that I did that.
Is that the motivation to go further, is just the adventure?
Yeah, a lot of it is the adventure, and also just the things, your scenery. When you're swimming in these lakes, and often it's early morning, and you just see the sun coming up on the trees behind the lakes, or the mist off the water. It's just beautiful. And I've done some longer swims in the ocean too, and the ocean water's a fair bit clearer than the lake, so you can see the bottom. And I did one in Port Phillip Bay, Melbourne, and you can see the soldier crabs on the bottom, and or the spider crabs, sorry, on the bottom. And we saw some big rays and some sea cucumbers. And I've done a few swims in the Great Barrier Reef too. Yeah, that's another story. You see the white-tip reef sharks, which they're not dangerous, but they look sharky, and they're pretty exciting to see. And there's heaps of fish, coral, all sorts of things. But yeah, part of it's the curiosity for nature, but part of it's now become also the curiosity of what can my body do, and how will my body respond in different situations? How do I need to fuel my body? It's an interesting thing. Even how is my mind going to react to different situations when things get hard and your shoulders get sore? Can you keep going? It's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. You're in good company. But I guess if you ever felt like you kind of hit a wall or some time maybe where you didn't think you could push through, or if you always just kind of like, yeah, just kept going.
I think I have in the Copeton swim, when the storm came, I thought, oh, do I want to get back in? But I sort of set in my mind a challenge of doing at least 30 kilometres. So I got in and finished that off. And with my running, I find if I set myself a challenge, then I can get through it. So 100 miles, or if I decide I want to run that, I can do it. Same with, but if I don't, if I sort of, in my mind, if I give myself an easy out, like if I say, oh, I might just stop at 20 kilometres, and then that starts playing on your mind, and then you sort of think, oh, well, I will pull out at 20 Ks. It's all, I think, not giving yourself the option to pull out unless you have to, unless there's some sort of injury or reason to do it.
You ever faced a point where you felt like injury or anything like that where you had to quit something?
I've been really lucky with injury. I haven't, well, I've been swimming all my life, but long distance swimming probably for 5 or 6 years. Then I've been running long distance for maybe 7 or 8 years. And I haven't really had an injury that stopped me running. And I don't know. I think maybe the running and swimming complement each other in keeping your body fit. And I also do yoga and try to, watch what I eat and all that sort of stuff. I did have an injury once where I fell off my son's scooter, but and that hurt my back and kept me out of action for a little while, but wasn't caused by running or swimming. Actually, the swimming, it was in winters, so the swimming was good in the cold water, below 10 degrees Celsius. It took all the pain away.
When did you start you said you had an interest in cold water. When did that start?
Maybe mid-2000s. I read Lynn Truss's book, Swimming to Antarctica, and it made me realise that you can swim in cold water, because before that, I'd heard stories about, oh, if you fall into cold water, you've got 5 minutes and you die. But that got me started again in Generic Dam, which is 10 kilometres out of town. I thought, I'm going to see if I can swim through there here. And I started in April, and then as the water temperature got down, it gets coldest in July. So I was swimming in a wetsuit, but occasionally I'd just go in and splash around without the wetsuit to see what it feels like. And I was doing 1 or 2 Ks in the wetsuit then. And then the next year I got rid of the wetsuit, because it's annoying to get in and out of a wetsuit when your fingers have been swimming in cold water and they're all clawed and you've got no strength in your fingers, so you can't undo zips and wiggle out. It was just easier to get in and put up with the cold and get out and warm up afterwards. So I've been doing swimming through the year here for at least 10 or 12 years in water that gets down to about 6 degrees. And I did, when COVID hit too, there's a group of pool swimmers that was in 2020, I suppose. There's a group of pool swimmers who came out to the dam when they closed all the indoor pools, and they started realizing how nice it is to swim in cold water through winter. And there were three of them, and we just started talking about doing an ice mile, and we sort of kept swam through 2020, 2021 winter, and then in 2022 we decided, okay, let's do it. So we started training for the ice mile, and in 2022 we went down to Thredbo, which is in our snowy mountains, and there was a few people from Sydney, a few people from Queensland, and we all did, had a go at doing an ice mile. But our Armidale team, there were four of us, were the only team who went completely through and did the ice. We all completed the ice mile, and I think it was because a lot of the other people were training with ice baths and swimming in pools. They couldn't get water below, say, 12 degrees. So, and there's a bit of a difference between swimming in 12 degrees and swimming in the water at Thredbo for me, it was 3.8 degrees, but we were getting in kayaks and canoes in the morning to break up the ice that was on the surface. So it got down to, it would have obviously been closer to zero on the surface before we did the swim.
Have you done any ice miles since?
I haven't, but one of the ladies one of the women I swam with, she has, Peter Bradley, her name is, she went over to, where was it? France, and competed in the ice swimming games, and she's been over to New Zealand to represent Australia. Yeah, so I still swim through the winter, and I still would like to do another ice mile. It's just the logistics of it, working it out, and getting the observers together and all that sort of stuff that you need to organise. But yeah, it's a great thing to do. I love the intensity of it. And towards the end of my ice mile, your vision restricts. You lose your peripheral vision, and then you just sort of keep going and keep going. And then you get out, and I got out and I sort of stood up and then got in the car to warm up with the heated jacket and a heater on. And I've lost a bit of that memory. So I must have had been a pretty intense experience. But we had, in our team, we had two doctors to look after us, and we had some nurses and lifesavers. So we're in pretty good hands, but it just highlights the danger of it. But it also emphasises the intensity of, what you go through and what your body can do.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that too with regard to distance. Do you have a preference of the ice versus the distance?
No, I don't know. Distance opens up more opportunities for adventure, but the ice just teaches you tolerance. The ice teaches you that you can be uncomfortable and be okay. I enjoy both, really. But the distance, I had a conference in Perth a few years ago, and there was a field trip to Rottnest Island. We're just off the Perth coast, and I'd missed out on getting the field trip because the numbers had filled up. Thought, I'll go to Rottnest Island and have a swim anyway. And I thought, I might do a swim and a run. And I did a double marathon. So a 10K swim along the coast of Rottnest Island. And then I went for a 42K run. And I think I got to see more of the island than the people on the field trip. And I enjoyed the underwater bit was really nice. I saw nudibranchs, which are little like sea slugs, colourful sea slugs, lots of different fish. And then on the run, I saw there was a seal colony further along the island that I didn't reach while I was swimming, but I got to see it during the run, and quokka, which are little kangaroo-type animals. And then there's some World War II bunkers on the island. They were defensive positions to help defend Perth, so I got to explore those. And it's just a great way of seeing it. So without the endurance, I wouldn't have had any of that. Wouldn't have been able to do any of that. So it's good fun.
Yeah, you don't have to have wheels or gasoline or electricity or anything. Just your own power, right?
No, that's right.
People power. I love it. Did you know that you can support Marathon Swim Stories by subscribing? Even just a few dollars would be helpful to keep the stories coming to listeners like you. Check the show notes for a link to subscribe, and be sure to reach out to me and tell me what you'd like to hear more of. Thank you. What's your fueling journey been like? One of the things you mentioned was that, the curiosity, like what you need to fuel your body to keep going. Like what have you explored and found that really worked for you?
Well, gels. Gels are good, but I really get sick of them after about 13 or so. But electrolytes, drinks like Tailwind, that have got energy in them as well. For swimming, I like more protein, something with a bit of protein in, like a Milo, which is sort of like a malt hot chocolate type drink, mixed with water. You can also mix it a bit with milk, but not too much milk for me. It sort of upsets the stomach. The interesting thing between fueling for running and fueling for swimming is when you're running, you're vertical, so you've got gravity working with you to keep the food down. When you're swimming, you're horizontal, and things come up a lot easier. But I like things like sandwiches, peanut butter and honey sandwiches, the stroop waffles, which are like little pancakey type things in packets that full of syrup. There's a lot of sweet things. I get a bit sick of sweet things, really. And then I get a drink that's no flavour, like an electrolyte drink that's got high carbs but no flavour. There's a lot of them around now. They're just like naked. They're called naked flavoured Tailwind, or there's a lot really. And then for longer runs or longer swims, I like to have something solid, but with that Coped Dam swim, my family paddled out. They went to a bakery and got me a cream bun and Portuguese tart. So they paddled that out to me, and I floated in the water eating that. And for my runs, things like pies or just normal food, really.
That's what we kind of crave after a while, right? We get tired of all the flavored fruit drinks and stuff. We need something solid.
I remember one run I did it was through a rainforest, and it was wet, and I had a cheeseburger from McDonald's in my running vest, and I pulled it out, and it was soggy and wet and cold, and I ate it, but it was such an enjoyable meal to eat after about 6 or 7 hours of running.
Have you traveled outside of Australia for swimming?
I have. I've done a few swimming trips to New Zealand. Well, New Zealand's a beautiful place if you like swimming. The water is very clear compared to what we have in Australia, and there's just options, temperature ranging from 1 degree up to 40 because they have thermal rivers. I've done 2 holidays with my family over there, but I've gone over a couple of times by myself just to hire a car, travel around and swim has been my objective. I've been to Japan, similar, just traveling and swimming. Portugal, bit in Germany, but not a lot. Never been to the US, or I've done a few of the Pacific Islands, Vanuatu and Fiji. Yeah, Vanuatu is a nice and interesting spot. There's a place called Million Dollar Point, and after World War II, the Americans had a base on one of the islands over there, and after World War II, they dumped a whole heap of stuff in the ocean, and it's created these big reefs that you can swim along or snorkel along. And there's also a lot of Coke bottles from 1942 that were glass back then, and they just wash up on the beach, and on the bottom they've got the factory that they came from, San Francisco, 1942, for example, because they used to return them and refilling. And there's still heaps over there that are washing up.
Oh, Americans.
Well, it had the benefit of creating a reef, though. It was, it's a tropical area anyway, but it's just created a place for the fish to swim around and swim through.
Have you done any organized swims since your 2K, or are you mostly just making stuff up on your own?
Yeah, well, most of them I make up, but yeah, I still do the the shorter ocean swims. There's 2 or 3 I do every year. And then there was a 24K swim in Port Phillip Bay in February this year that I That's the Ultra 24 Safety Beach to Sorrento swim. Another thing I do is I swim every day, and I've been doing that since 2014. And in March this year was the 10th anniversary of me swimming every day for 10 years, for every day, yeah. So as part of the celebration for that, I did the Safety Beach to Sorrento 24K swim, and that was good. We had to get a paddler, and I didn't know a paddler down in Melbourne. So I got in touch with a young bloke through someone who I used to work with, and he'd never paddled a kayak before. So I met him the day before the swim, and we hired a kayak, and it was a very flat piece of water. And he'd gone through the online training that he needed to do for the paddle, and we had all our safety gear worked out. And we got in, and he started paddling. He did 24 Ks fairly well, and I enjoyed the swim. And a few points, like I'd be swimming, and I swim with earplugs because I get sore ears without them. And I'd look up, and I thought he was talking to me. His mouth was moving, and he was paddling along. But I took my earplugs out, and he was just singing to himself, having a great time paddling his kayak. And parts of the swim were fairly shallow, so I'd swim down and I'd pick up a sea cucumber and show him that, and show him different things. So it was a great adventure for the both of us, really.
What does your family think of your crazy swim run adventuring?
Well, the kids enjoy the swimming, and my wife's very tolerant of my running and swimming too. But she gets involved with support. For the Safety Beach swim, she was the land crew. We had to have a land crew, and the paddler would go to shore and restock and then come back, and we'd continue swimming. And she's been at most of the start and finish lines of everything I've ever done. So yeah, it's great to have that support. And for my own adventures, like if I'm running through the forest, she'll meet me part way and give me water and fuel. But a lot of our holidays are based around my swimming or running.
That's what my family strife usually comes from, trying to plan every holiday around my swimming.
It's great, though, to have people like that who let you do that sort of stuff. It's an important part of who I am and who all of us are. So.
It can take you to some pretty cool places, is what I find too.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And some of the places we've gone for running or swimming, we would never have thought to go just as a normal holiday. And it takes you away from a lot of the main touristy spots into different parts of Australia or New Zealand or the world. And we've got 4 kids, and they all can swim. One of them, my eldest son, he's in the Air Force. He started running and swimming and doing a bit more adventurous stuff, but none of them have yet taken up open water swimming. But I was in my early 20s when I took it up, and before then I was swimming for fun and swimming for curiosity, and they've all got that. They've all sort of grown up swimming in rivers and lakes and looking at different crayfish and all that sort of stuff.
The swimming in an aquifer is really intriguing to me, but yeah, was there anything interesting that you could see when you were swimming in an aquifer?
Oh, no. Well, it's very dark, as you can imagine. So, and the cave, it wasn't very deep. The caves, there's a few I've done, but some of them are, they're only 2 meters deep, and you've got to be careful moving through them because you puff up sediment. And because I wasn't diving, I was restricted to parts of the cave that have air above them, and there were no fish, nothing to see really in the caves, but I was sampling with a net, and I did find, you do get little amphipods, which are a type of crustacean that are about 1 centimetre long. And then there's a lot of other little invertebrates, copepods, ostracods, other isopods. They're all microcrustaceans or, a type of crustacean. And you just catch them by dragging a net behind you. And a lot of them, because this was early work that no one had really sampled these places before, we were finding new species, and we still find new species in the work we do today. I've got two bugs, two invertebrates I've got named after two of my kids, so that's good. I've got two more kids to name something after, and we're done. But a lot of them we just sample by lowering nets down into groundwater bores, so which are pipes that go down into the aquifer where you pump water out, and we just drop nets down and pull them up and see what's living down there.
What is the most interesting thing that you've seen on your swimming adventures?
Wow, there's been a lot. Well, always like platypus, so I'm with them quite a bit. They're tricky because they can be skittish, but you can get in a river where there's platypus. The best time to be there is early morning, and you can often see them swimming on the surface, and then they'll duck underwater to go and find some food. But while they're underwater, you can move and get in the water, and then they come up, and then you can sort of move closer to them. And they're very tricky to see underwater. I've seen them a couple of times just swimming underneath me. You've got to surprise them, but they're an interesting animal. I've swum, what else? Oh, freshwater jellyfish, which they're only about an inch or two centimetres round, but they occur sporadically. So they might, in things like reservoirs or lakes, they'll have a larval stage at the bottom of the lake that lasts maybe 13 years. And then they'll bloom, and you'll get every 13 years, or depending on environmental conditions and how the water is, they'll bloom and come up to the surface. And I've swum with those maybe 3 times. They don't sting. They're very interesting. They just sort of float around on the surface, catching microinvertebrates and ingesting them. But yeah, they're another thing not many people come across. Sharks, bull sharks. There's a river we sample for work in northern New South Wales, and we sample the freshwater reach of the river, which is about 20 kilometres inland from the coast. And the bull sharks get up there. They don't attack people up there. The place, and we sometimes will catch the juveniles bull sharks, which are 60 centimetres or about 2 feet long, and we're in our nets, and we'll release them. And I've released some once, and I've just swum with them to see how they go, keeping an eye out for the mother, because there have been reports of sharks nearly 6 foot long up in that part of the river. No one as yet has been attacked, and it's quite a popular swimming spot, and people take their dogs there. So I think the sharks are more interested in the fish. There's a surprising amount of fish. Because the rivers are narrower, it channels all the fish into a sort of a narrow, and that's what the sharks are after, I think. And freshwater crocodiles in Lake Argyle. There's a lot.
Any scary moments you've ever had while swimming?
The scariest would have been a few years ago. I was swimming with my kids, and we were near a place called Yamba. The beach was actually called Spooky Beach, and I had my son with me, who he would have been 5 maybe at the time, and my daughter, who would have been 7. She was out a bit further, about 50 metres offshore, and I just looked up and I saw a fin out of the water, and it was a tiger shark fin. And my daughter saw it too, and she said, "Oh, is that a shark, Dad?" And I said, "Yes, just stay there," because I didn't want her to panic. And then the fin went underwater. It came towards the shore. We were at it was a rock shelf, and it was coming, and I think it was just on a rock shelf looking for turtles. And then it turned towards Josh and I, and then it went underwater. And then I just saw it turn back out to sea. I put Josh up on a rock that was behind it, and it was heading out towards where my daughter was. And I just told her, just stay there, because if she'd have swum back towards me, she would have gone right in front of it. And then I lost sight of where the shark was. And it was just a really terrifying moment where I was just watching Steph, and just hoping that everything and it'd go all right. And then after a while, the shark had obviously gone, and I said, okay, come back in. And we got in and we sort of had a bit of a debrief on the beach and released the stress and all that sort of stuff. And then the kids said, okay, let's go to the next beach. So we just walked around the corner and went into another. So they were keen to get back in the water. So, which is probably a good thing. You don't want to let something like that scare you out of the water for too long. And that was probably the most terrifying moment.
Yeah, when our kids are involved, it's a whole nother story, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Feels like the risk of, I guess, and I don't know the statistics on it, but getting hit by a car or something is probably going to happen before you're going to get attacked by a shark.
I think so. And also things like bacterial infections can be, that they damage. A lot more people get sick from them than they do from sharks.
Okay, I think I have two questions to round this out. One is you swam in a lot of places. If there was somebody coming to visit you who'd never swam in some of the places that you've gotten to swim, where would you want to take them to see? There's
a lake in New Zealand called Lake Hiroko, and it's the deepest lake in New Zealand. And it's a beautiful stony beach. It's terrible in summer because there's midges which bite you. But at other times of the year, it's quite like it's surrounded by mountains, and there's very few people who go there. And then it's, forested all around the shore, and it's just a beautiful spot. And that would be one place, I think, just to get them that nature experience. And then last question, as a person who spends a lot of time in the water and I guess I think of an element of kind of water quality and awareness, what do you wish that more swimmers knew about the waters of the world? I suppose that they're all connected to the land, and what we do on the land actually impacts the water. So a lot of the work I do in Australia deals with ephemeral rivers, which are creeks that are dry most of the time. And we also have drought in Australia. And at the end of every drought, there's usually a lot of rainfall. But because the ground has been dry and because there's been a lot of clearing and a lot of exposure of the soil, as soon as you get a big dump of rain, that washes into the creek. And that has really long-term and large-scale effects on the fish and the invertebrates and things living in our rivers. So it's maybe not something that everyone can do something about, but it's on a governmental level. Clearing of land has big impacts on the river, and on every river flows into the sea, and the Great Barrier Reef is struggling at the moment because of that. A lot of sediment load goes in. Coral requires sunlight to photosynthesize, and if there's stuff in the water that makes the water turbid, that photosynthesis doesn't occur. And sediment also contains nutrients, which creates algal blooms and other things like that. So it's maybe thinking of our rivers as part of the landscape that we live in and that we manage. But also for every person, just to try and find something to be curious about in the water. When you're swimming with goggles, have a look around at the fish. If you're in a river, swim along the riverbank and see, what's living under the bank, or dive down and pick up a rock and have a look at the insects and things that are living on a rock, just to realise that they're living environments. There's a lot of things living in rivers and the ocean that most people don't think about, but they're there, and they're all doing a good job in helping keep the water clean and maintaining fish populations and being food for fish, or they do all sorts of things. They're not just there for the sake of being there. Thank you for reaching out, Peter, and thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Shannon. That was good.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you were inspired by even just a moment of this story, please share it with a friend. You never know what might push someone out of their comfort zone so that they can find out what they're capable of. And please leave a review with your podcast provider. It truly helps others discover the raw and honest stories of these amazing endurance swimmers. Thanks for listening.